Every morning I bathe myself in intellect, in this stupendous and cosmetic knowledge. In comparison, all our modern world and literature is puny and trivial. Why is it important to preserve and nurture this dimension of life? The fundamental reason why it seems to be so significantly different is because it is not a product of human intellect. It is not deductions that we made out of our intellect. This dimension comes from a profound inner experience where there is no right and wrong, there is no up and down, just seeing things as the way they are. Mindsets that everybody has to belong to some segments of humanity. So you come from a mindset where humanity has to be divided one way or the other because they come from the surface. Intelligence of human nature, which we call as intellect. Unfortunately, the modern societies, modern educational systems have entirely dedicated themselves to the human intellect, completely ignoring other dimensions of intelligence, which definitely exist within us. When you go by the intellect, the nature of the intellect is always to dissect and divide, because intellect is discriminatory in nature, and intellect functions always with a certain identity. If you have no identity, you cannot use your intellect. So, with individual identities, either of race, religion, nationality, caste, creed, or gender within us, when I say a deeper dimension of intelligence, a simplistic way of looking at it would be whatever you had for lunch today. You definitely cannot do that with your intellect, as I mentioned. The intelligence which is beyond thought process or the product of intellect is essentially always functioning from a limited amount of data that we have gathered now. What we call as wisdom is not coming from a limited amount of data that we have gathered either from the books or our life experience, but simply by enhancing our ability to perceive life in ways that the five sense organs cannot function. Why am I talking about the five sense organs? Is the data that you have either gathered which rest in somebody's aspect within you, which is the food for the intellect, comes from the five sense organs. In the very nature of things, sense organs cannot perceive the entirety of anything. If you can see parts, if you can see this part of my hand, you cannot see this part of my hand. This is the nature of the sense perception. Even if you take a grain percent of one part, you cannot see the other face. Since the organs can only perceive in comparison, there is no comparison. Your senses are useless because there is darkness. You know what is light, otherwise you just would not know what it is like if light was like if there is time there was no darkness. You would not know what is light. Because there is silence, you would not know what it was sounds. If there was no silence, you would not have the idea what is sound. So always in comparison, it is like, let's say you're 6 feet tall. Now you walk like a tall person. You think like a tall person. You feel like a tall person. You are now a tall person. And then you went to another society where everyone is 8 feet tall. Suddenly, you walk like a short person. You think like a short person, and you think like a short person, you feel like a short person, and you are a short person. So, what if you perceive in comparison is a distortion of reality? It is not reality as it is. So, whatever we perceive in comparison is useful for our survival process. Whatever is useful for, but if we want to know the nature of this existence, sense organs are not sufficient instruments. What is life for you is darkness for many other creatures. You even got into an argument. Have you ever gotten into an argument with an owl? If you did, which is light, which is darkness, where would it go? It would be an endless argument. Who is right, you or the owl? The fact of the matter is you are perceiving it as necessary for your survival. That owl perceiving it as necessary for its survival. If survival is what you're seeking, your 5 sense organs and intellect are sufficient instruments. But if you want to know the nature, this existence, if you want to know the fundamental laws which govern life, the way it happens within us and around us, then you need an inner perception or another dimension of intelligence within you. Otherwise, you will only cut the world into pieces. In the name of religions, we cut the world into and humanity into pieces because intellectually we have arrived at our own conclusions or deductions, which variably bound to divide because intellect is essentially the dimension of intelligence within you. It can only dissect. By dissection, you can know certain things, but if you really want to know someone that you love, you don't dissect them, you embrace them. By dissection, you may know the kidney, liver, heart, and stuff, but you will not know the being in any sense. You will lose it completely. So dissection is the way of the intellect because it is a sharp instrument. It has cut open everything that's given to it, but there is another way out of profoundness of experience. You can know life by turning inward. You can know life. When I say turning inward, you must understand that essentially the 5 sense organs are always outwards. You can see what's around you, but you cannot roll your eyes into the back of your head and scan yourself. You can hear this or that, so much activity that's this body, but you cannot hear this as if an ant crawls upon your hand. You can feel it as you can't feel the blood that's flowing inside of you. The very nature of things, since organs are outward bound, the moment you dedicate yourself to inner intellect, you will also get enslaved to the limitations of your five senses. It is in this context that wisdom is of tremendous significance to the world, because it has transcended this slavery to sense perception and learned to perceive life in a completely different way. What is this completely different way? There are several parts of the mind. There are several different dimensions of the human mind. And it'll take too much time to discuss all of them, so let's just compress them into four. The four aspects of the mind are, one of them is the intellect. Today, modern world is largely ran by the intellect. So with this, we can do many things on the outside. We can go on enhancing and comfort and conveniences in life. We have done very well in terms of comfort and conveniences. Never before this, there, or any other generation of humanity had ever knew the kinds of comfort and conveniences that which we have today. But at the same time, we are whining like never before, because as the comfort and convenience, say, increases on the outside, there is less to complain about what is happening around you. The emptiness of within echoes within you in a horrible way. When you're fighting for survival, when every day you are struggling to fix small things on the outside, you will not realize this. When the outside is settled, that is when you will see how hollow life has become. The biggest question in the world you will see in the next few decades is, what the hell are we doing here anyway? Because everything that needs to be fixed on the outside is done. Now what? There are 7.2 billion people on our planet right now. Gradually, it's looming large. Loneliness is one of the biggest problems. Dogs are being tortured to fulfill human loneliness, because as you dedicate yourself more and more to your intellect, you will normally become more and more lonely, because it keeps on dissecting and cutting life into various pieces for examination, and then you will see yourself will be split up into many parts after some time if you go by intellect 100%. The next thing of the mind is referred to your identity. Most people, they think it means ego. You are identified with something. The moment you are identified with something, your intellect will work only to protect that identity, no matter what. Whichever way you think, your ideas of which nation you belong to, which race you belong to, which culture you belong to, which religion do you belong to, which gender you belong to. The moment you get identified, You nurture, your nature will work only to protect that identity. So it is a certain kind of prejudice because people are willing to live and die for what they are identified with. Because the nature of intellect is if you take away the identity, it will not know what to do. So it needs a strong identity, a strong sense of who I am. If asked, who am I? Your intellect will not function. You must know who you are, a strong sense of belief that this is who I am. This is when your intellect will function in a certain way. It is like intellect, it is like a sharp knife. The identity is the hand that holds it. All of this suffering on the planet, when was the last time that somebody stabbed you? Or what I'm saying is, how much suffering for a human being is actually coming from the outside? Almost nothing. The rest is all self-help, because this is a sharp knife given to you, unsteady hand. Every day it is cutting itself. All that's happening is your intellect is working against you. That's all it is, unless someone is stabbing you from the outside. That is a different issue we need to deal with. That definitely the rest of all your own intelligence and turning against you. But this intellect cannot function without a memory bank. So what is called as madness as a silo of memory. Now, the fourth dimension of intelligence is, as I mentioned, of intelligence, which is unsullied by memory. If you touch this dimension, when the memory has no influence on you, your genetic memory, your evolutionary memory, your conscious memory, unconscious memory, subconscious memory, whatever kinds of memories you have, it has no influence over you. Or in other words, the past cannot recycle itself through you. See, right now you take on this form because of a certain memory. It's a certain software. If you eat, let's say, you're a man, and if you eat a piece of bread, then this piece of bread turns into a man. I'm a woman, and if I eat a piece of bread, the same piece of bread turns into a woman. You give it to your dog, it turns to the very same piece of bread. It's a piece of intelligence. It is just a memory that you carry. Here, there is a memory which transforms everything to the way it is. So this dimension of intelligence, which is called Chista, which is untouched by any kind of memory, just pure intelligence, is of significance because it's just beyond your species, it's just beyond your form, it's just beyond your gender, it's just beyond your culture, it's just beyond every kind of influence, which is essentially memory within you.